Hi there, in this video we're going to highlight a totally dynamic agentic system using an insurance claim as an example. Now before we talk about adding AI agents, let's first take a look at the state pre-AI. So as you might suspect, the process that you're seeing here on screen is built with AgilePoint's Composable Automation Platform and has been running for some time. Now one of the main drivers from an AgilePoint perspective is that it helps us generate AI-ready data to facilitate the operationalization of agentic AI using the AgilePoint Control Tower framework. Now as a next step, you might be wondering, what does it look like to add AgilePoint agents? So for that, I'm moving into my next tab where I have a number of agents that are watching over key stages of our process. Now we're going to come back to our agents here in just a second, but before we do that, let's first take a look at the typical happy path flow of our insurance claim. So the process will start with a customer of an insurance firm getting into an accident and calling in to the 24/7 call center. The customer is going to relay initial details about the accident, which will all be captured by our call center agent. From here, the process flows externally. You may be familiar with AgilePoint's anonymous task capabilities, which allow for external user participation. And at this stage, the customer will be prompted to provide a more detailed description of the accident, as well as supply any images of damage to their vehicle. So from here, it's going to flow to the claims handler, who essentially determines whether the claim has enough information to proceed further, through to a claims assessor, a field officer in the event that an inspection is required, as well as an approver, and a series of steps from there. So with that, let's go back up to the top and look at the various agents that will be acting at different stages of our business process. Now before I talk about the agent behavior, I'd like to point out that AgilePoint provides a number of control tower integrations available on the left-hand side. In the case of this demo, all three AgilePoint agents are coming from the SageMaker stencil, and you'll notice that none of them are connected to any particular step in this process. These agents are in fact event-driven and subscribe to various process events and support advanced filtering to ensure that we can keep our AI costs low and that AI is only used in the most impactful of scenarios. In fact, it's this clean separation between our AI and application logic that makes operationalizing agentic AI through the AgilePoint Composable Platform as straightforward as possible. Our first agent is an image classification agent that is in charge of analyzing the customer-provided photo showing damage to their vehicle. In that analysis, it will determine which part of the vehicle was damaged in the accident. From there, we have a text or LLM-based agent, our claims analyzer. This agent is in charge of analyzing the accident description provided initially to the call center agent, as well as the more detailed accident description supplied by the customer. And finally, these two agents will hand their insights over to our final fraud predictive agent, who will make a determination as to whether or not fraud is likely in this particular claim. Now, in the event that fraud is likely, we're going to see our predictive agent stop the typical happy path processing and dynamically insert a new step for the special investigation team that does not exist at design time to automatically handle our exception. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and run the application. So I've just logged into my claims management portal, all built by AgilePoint's Page Builder. I have a number of reporting widgets to help me understand the claims that are currently in flight, as well as broken down by status. Okay, so to save some time here, I've pre-filled all of the details to launch our new claim. I've looked up the policy ID from our policy management system and selected the vehicle and driver involved in the incident. I've captured the initial details of the accident, including the initial description as provided by the customer, the third party that was involved in the accident. I can also see this customer's prior claim history and left a comment, which means we can now go ahead and open up our new claim. So that we can follow along, let's open up the process tracker. All right, so as you can see here, we've just opened up a new claim and the process is now sitting with an external customer engagement step. Okay, so let's shift gears now and play the role of the customer. So I've received a nicely formatted email with all of the relevant details, including my policy ID and claim ID, with a link to input more details about the accident. Okay, so as you're seeing here on screen, it's asking me for an image of any damage to my vehicle. Now recall that this is going to be fed into our image classification agent, and as you can see from the image I'm showing here on screen, clearly showing damage to the front of my vehicle. Now while that's uploading, if I scroll down towards the bottom, I can provide a more detailed accident description, which will be analyzed by our LLM or Claims Analyzer agent. Now I'd like to introduce some pretty clear conflict between the damage shown in the image to that shown in the description. So here, rather than the car front left side, I'm going to introduce very clear conflict and describe that the back of my vehicle was damaged. So with that being said, let's go back into our process tracker and we're going to watch our various event-driven AI control tower agents spring into action. Okay, so as you've just seen, a number of green checks next to each of our agents mean they were successfully invoked and have completed their work. So as a result, I can go back into my task list and we can take action against the next stage of our claim. So in opening up my task list, you're seeing here I now have a fraud alert. This might be raised to a subject matter expert or perhaps application owner, indicating there's a scenario that requires further investigation. So if I open up this task, what we'll see are the insights uncovered by our various agents. Starting here with the damage assessment, this is showing the results of our image classification agent, which has correctly identified that damage to the front of the vehicle was sustained. Under AI analysis, you're going to see the feedback from our text or claims analyzer agent that has identified, though the accident description was provided by an authentic human, there are key areas of discrepancy, including the various accident descriptions. Now the next stage here shows AgilePoint's control tower's ability to bring a human into the loop. While we do have the ability for the control towers to act autonomously, there is an optional layer of governance where we can assign tasks to a human to either accept or reject the suggested changes to a process. So in this particular stage, the control tower is suggesting we dynamically insert a new step for the investigation team. And just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to go ahead and assign this to myself. Now as the next stage, I do want to ensure that the typical processing does not move forward until the investigation team can complete their work. So I'm going to lock any downstream steps until the investigator's work is completed. Okay, so just a second back, we mentioned that we've stopped the typical happy path processing. In fact, if I were to try to open up this claims handler stage, I'm going to receive a pop-up notification indicating that fraud is likely in this particular claim and that the typical processing has been paused until the investigation team can complete their work. So what's happening now behind the scenes is the AI control tower is now dynamically inserting a new step into our process for the investigative unit that does not exist at design time. In fact, if I were to refresh my task list, we're going to see that newly inserted step. And whenever AgilePoint's control tower framework deviates from the typical processing, there is an explainability and observability UI called the Adaptive Orchestration Monitor, showing the actual path that a process has taken. So as I scroll down here, this is my typical flow with the claims handler step currently paused, as you've just seen. Scrolling further, we're going to see that a new step has been dynamically inserted into the process for the investigation team. So with that said, I can go back into my task list, pick up the investigator task, and use my expertise as an investigator to determine whether these AI indicators are truly indicative of fraud. So again, here, all of the AI insights all in one place, my image classification agent, my text agent, and then finally, determine how this process should move forward. Now, as the investigator, I'm going to take an offline action to review both police and fire reports. And as a result, I've determined that in this claim, there is no fraud. We simply have a customer who is a little bit frazzled after having had an accident. So as a result, I'm going to release the lock on the typical processing and allow the claim to move forward with our next step, the claims assessor. So having done that, it's time to go back quickly to the adaptive orchestration monitor and refresh it. And we're going to see that the lock on the claims handler step has been removed and that we're now resuming the typical processing. As a final step, from a security, governance, or simply ongoing model retraining perspective, bear in mind that everything you've just seen from a visual audit trail is also available in AgilePoint's textual audit trail. So as you can see here, I've brought up this particular instance in my Manage console, and you'll notice that I have a tab entirely dedicated to the actions taken by control towers. So as you can see here, I can drill into the details into each action taken into an agent and why. So that's going to conclude the content for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.